Right. People are jumping in. Daniel, Jack, Darko, S.A., Andre. If you can see and hear me, let me know in the chat box. Should be, you can look at the bottom of your screen, hit the chat box button, and then you can type to me as a panelist, or you can type to all panelists and attendees. If you change the drop-down box, let me know that you can see and hear me. Hey, Jack, what's up, man? Gary's here. Harris is here. Uwe is here. Varun, Walt. Cool. Cool. Looks like people can see and hear, which is always good. Well, cool. I'm going to let people roll in for a couple minutes, and then we'll start diving into your questions. As you're rolling in, let me know that you can see and hear me and where you're tuning in from for this live monthly coaching call. And I've got questions here from the VIP members area that those of you who are watching the recording who can't be here live have submitted. So thank you. I've got those pulled up. And we've got Daniels from Martinique. We've got Harris from Greece. Darko's from Slovenia. Varun is from India. And then Jack's from Texas. We finally have someone from the U.S. What an international audience. Michael's from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Gary's from St. Louis, Missouri. Man, this is awesome. This is what I love about VIP. This is one reason why I wanted to put it together was I can see the stats of where you guys are tuning in from when you watch my videos or read my articles or come to my site. And the last I checked, in terms of just traffic to my site, to recordingrevolution.com, there are hits from over 200 countries, which is insane. It just shows how vast and diverse you are. And so VIP was like one of our goals is to bring you all together so that you can talk to each other. So super cool to see and hear. So as people are jumping in, welcome. We're going to get started here in a couple of minutes. Make you aware of where everything is. There's a chat box where you can chat to each other and to me. If you change the drop down to all panelists and attendees, then everybody can see your chat, not just me. There's a Q&A box. I want you to pop that open. That's where I want you to actually submit your questions. So we can talk in the chat box, but your official question, like submit it in the Q&A box. That way I can better keep track of it. And I can mark it when I've answered it so that I won't miss anything. And I'm going to do my best. The last couple months, there have been a lot of you here live and a lot of submitted questions, and I haven't been able to get to all of them. And we've gone over every single time because I've been trying to answer as many questions as I possibly can. But fill in the Q&A box. That's going to be where I can keep track of your questions. Mick is here. Michael, Rob, Jeff. Let's see who else is here. Mick, did I catch you? I'm just trying to see who's rolling in live. Cool. Well, okay, I'm going to let more people roll in, but I'm going to get started. If you have questions live, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and then I'll start answering and try to do as much as I can. We'll go for at least an hour. At the end of an hour, if I still see a bunch of questions coming in, I think I can flex a little bit longer, so I will try to do my best to answer all your questions. And you can ask me about anything. Anything about recording, mixing, gear, music, business, life, whatever you want to talk about, that's what we'll do. So here we go. Michael's got a question in the live call. What's a good practical way to get exposure to your music? But I'm guessing from your or for your music is what you're saying. How do you get your music exposed, Michael? So become a content creator. Do what I do. You don't have to do 100% like what I do with Recording Revolution, but create a YouTube channel, get on social, Facebook, start just uploading videos. Okay. Share your music, of course, but upload videos about, you playing music, you writing music, your tour of your studio, song ideas you have, play live concerts, record acoustic versions of songs. Just start to create content that's ideally on YouTube. Facebook can work really well too. But create content, do covers, covers are great. I'm saying you have to become a cover person, but occasionally do a cover of an artist that's really close to you. This is something to think about too. And this is something I learned or was really beat into my head through my buddy Ivan, or Ill Factor, over at Beat Academy, is all of us think like we sound different and we don't sound like any other artist and we're special and we're this unique blend. And I get that. There's a reason why you're making the music you're making, but that doesn't help you actually get exposure. What helps you get exposure is help people who could be potential fans understand what your music sounds like. And the best way to do that is to have like 3 artists that you would say you sound closest to. So if I was doing like some of my college rock stuff that I was doing in the early 2000s, I would say, so I had a band in college called Unit 5, and I would say like Unit 5, you love our music if you're a fan of, Stone Temple Pilots, Hoobastank, and Foo Fighters, something like that, right? I'd give them 3 artists that they can instantly go, oh, I get what kind of music you are. And that helps them, because if they like Hoobastank, which they should because that band is awesome, if they like Foo Fighters, which they should, if they like Stone Temple Pilots, then they'll be like, got it. It's going to be guitars, riff rock, killer vocal, got it. And so if they dig that, they're going to then want to pursue you more, because everybody needs a box to put you in. I know you don't want to be put in a box, but if you want to promote your music, be strategic. Think about the way people actually want to consume music. They want to know ahead of time, before they commit to listening to even a minute of your music, what can they expect? And then, of course, if they dig those things and they're going to dig your music, then they're going to be, this is great, I love it. And it's going to be unique in its own way. But knowing and identifying what your 3 closest artists are, mentioning that a lot, doing a cover of each of those songs, putting the band name in your YouTube video. You don't have to become a cover artist, but occasionally do some covers of artists that you're similar to, because that'll be keywords that people who are searching for Hoobastank or Stone Temple Pilots or Foo Fighters, whatever the bands I just mentioned, they might find you, right? So you have to think about, what are people typing in to YouTube? What do people like that you would be relevant towards? You don't want to clickbait. Clickbait is when you say you're one thing and then it's not what they expected. That's where you trick somebody. You don't need to trick people, but you need to think about who else would like your music. What else are they typing into YouTube? YouTube is just a great platform to be discovered. But you just got to think of yourself as a content creator. I did a video a year or 2 ago, maybe 2 years ago, I think it was called The New Rules of the Music Industry. There's 2 that I did, and I talk about one of these concepts in both of these videos. The New Rules of the Music Industry. Go watch that video. I think that's the one where I talk about you have to view yourself as a content creator to make it in this business these days. But it's fun. It's more fun than you think. Great question. Varun says on the live call, I recently purchased the Jakir King webinar recording. Awesome. And was watching his approach on preamps and mics. I use a universal audio interface, which supports unison mic preamp technology, letting me use preamp emulations while I'm recording. I wanted your view on preamp coloring and how important it is to have different preamps for tracking different instruments. Okay, so this is the way Jakir works. This is the way I was taught as well. If you have access to multiple preamps, and with the Apollo interfaces or the Aero or any of the UA interfaces that have their preamp modeling technology, you get a couple of different preamps out of the box. You get the clean, UA preamp, just the actual preamp, and then you can model their 610. Sometimes you can model a Neve, an API. So it depends on what plugins you have. But that is a benefit to you, because what Jakir is saying, and this is the way preamps come into play, is if you record every track through the same preamp, it all is going to have that sameness to it. Okay? That's not necessarily bad. It just means when it comes time to mix, you're going to have to EQ them differently, add some tonal characteristics, maybe different compressor plugins on different tracks to give each track its own little sonic imprint, its own sonic character, so that it doesn't all sound mushy and the same. Think about a good meal. If you have a good plate of good food, if you've been to a cheap restaurant, whether it's the steak or the mashed potatoes or the broccoli, it all tastes the same because it was all cooked in the same oil with the same seasonings. It's just like, dude, I know they're all totally different foods, but all taste the same. Whereas a good restaurant has very different seasonings on each piece of the meal and cooked with different flavors and reduced with different sauces or wines or with different oils and different, rubs and all kinds of stuff, so that every piece of food on that plate tastes unique, which makes the whole meal more enjoyable because you zero in on and pay attention to all the unique things on the plate. Preamps can help you do that. So if you have an Apollo or a UA interface, I would record the lead vocal through one preamp, the background vocals through a totally different preamp. I would record, the one guitar on the left through one preamp, guitar on the right through a different preamp. If you're miking them up, acoustic guitar, I would just use as many different preamps as you can and alternate them. That's the whole point. So it really does help you with tracking because it's going to create different sonic textures. And that's what Shakir is saying. Good question. Darian says, Graham, I like how you spell my name, Graham. How can I treat a room for recording? My only option is my bedroom. It's concrete walls, rectangle room with a lot of reflections. How can I improve my room? Great question. So there's a lot of things you can do. For one, you can find an optimal spot in your room so that you have to optimize your room for two different tasks. One is recording and the other is mixing, and they're very different. Okay. So for mixing, that's the most important thing because it affects where you put your furniture, and you need to probably address that first. You got to create a mixing sweet spot. Okay. I address this on the blog. I've addressed this in depth in a video in my Mixing University course, where you have to choose your desk and therefore your monitor speakers wisely. Choose where you place them wisely. Ideally against, not in the middle of your room. So pick one side of your room. Like I'm in a rectangle right now. Behind me is one end of this rectangle, and in front of me is a wall. Okay. Now on my desk so I'm at one end, and then two, you want to be off the wall. My desk is off the wall by a foot and a half, maybe 18 inches. So that my speakers are 18 inches off the wall, a foot and a half off the wall, half a meter off the wall. Okay. You don't want to be backed up to the wall. You want to be off the wall. So you have that separation, that space. And then you want to place your desk and your speakers primarily completely symmetrical from left to right. So I literally measure the corners of my speakers to the walls, the center of the cones to the wall, so that the sound that goes out of my speakers and bounces against the walls, which I know you can't see, that way the reflections that are always going to be there will at least be hitting my ears without any delay. They'll be hitting my ears perfectly in sync, which will help with my stereo image. Okay, so you want to place your speakers with symmetry. You want to have them at ear level when you sit. So the top tweeter of my speakers is exactly at my ear. All right, you want that. And then you want them facing you, not like flat, like a lot of people do. Even in big studios, like the NS10s, the Yamaha NS10s will be flat. Like they really should be angled in at your mixing sweet spot to create an equilateral triangle, which is the other piece, is that the speakers are the same distance from each other across as they are from you. So your head should be in a perfect equal lateral triangle. Each side of the triangle is equal length. All of that creates a perfect listening environment in terms of placement for your mixing position. That's where you start. Then you want to add treatment around your mixing position if that's an option for you. Panels strategically around your mixing position to absorb some of those reflections, to tighten up what it sounds like to you when you're sitting here in this spot. It's not going to be perfect, but it can be better. And then if you don't have acoustic treatment, you can put a bookshelf on either side of you filled with books. That will absorb just as well as panels. That's a great option. So become a reader, buy lots of old books from the library or whatever, and put bookshelves right next to you if you don't have panels. That can really, really help. Then when it comes to tracking and recording, that's a little bit different because now it's really about where in the room does it sound best, treatment or not. There's going to be weird nodes and build up in certain corners or spots in your room. So you want to actually like test a vocal recording and kind of move around the room and record a little bit and find what's the best spot to record vocals in your room. It's probably the best spot to record a lot of things. You want to stay away from walls. You want to use a cardioid microphone so that the back of the microphone doesn't pick up sound, and you can place the back of the microphone at the noisiest spot or where the most reflections are to sort of minimize the reflections. If you have a closet, put up a bunch of clothes and a bunch of pillows on the shelf, and that'll absorb sound. You can record vocals in a closet. I've done that. Or just save up money and buy some panels for your room, and then just kind of create your mixing sweet spot with the panels ideally, and then sort of just throughout the room, put panels wherever you can to sort of strategically absorb a lot of those reflections. So that's kind of what I would do. And again, it's not going to be perfect. I don't have a perfect room. I really don't. I have a really tight stereo image and pretty good spot right here. I built it out to be pretty darn good. But I don't have a lot of perfect low end. I have to slide back here to get like the low end to be accurately hear the low end. So I kind of have like two listening positions, the main one, and then when I move my head back. So hope that answers your question. If you're new to the call live, make sure you use the Q&A box to submit your question, by the way. We'll go ahead and take that. I'm going to do some questions that were submitted ahead of time. Chung says, my name's Chung. I'm from Australia. I'm quite a beginner in recording and mixing at my home studio. I'm learning your mixing university and improving a lot. I use ProTools 2018 as my DAW. My main interest is mixing and recording choir and choral. I'm a choir conductor myself at church. Very cool. Apart from the bundle plugins that come with Pro Tools, what plugins do you recommend for mixing choir to deepen bass vocal and make female group vocals pop up like the pros do? My favorite choir is ATI Symphonic Choir. I'm so keen to learn about choir recording, mixing, but it is very different sort of music now. I couldn't find a tutorial on it. Yeah, so great question. I don't do a lot of choir stuff, so that's probably why you don't see any tutorials from me. To your question, though, you don't need any third-party plugins to do what you just asked about deepening the bass vocal or making female group vocals pop like the pros do. Okay, to make things pop, it's all about strategic EQ and compression. Now, you might use different settings than you would on like a little literal pop track, but that's just EQ and compression. Now, if you want third-party plugins, it depends on what you need to do. So I think something that would be nice for choir recordings would maybe be like tape saturation. Get a good tape saturation plugin. Waves has a few. UA have a few. I like Steven Slate's virtual tape machines plugin. That's going to add a nice character and warmth to the choir vocals. That will be reminiscent of the way we've heard all famous choral music recorded, because it was all recorded to tape up until the late 80s, right? So a tape saturation plugin might be really nice. A virtual tube saturation plugin. Any kind of saturation plugins are worth buying if you don't have one. And Pro Tools doesn't really have a great one. It has Lo-Fi, which has a saturation knob on it, but it's not quite the same. Unless you're in Pro Tools HD, then you have heat built in. That's a really cool plugin. That does a very similar thing. So I would get some kind of saturation plugin. Potentially a really nice reverb. I don't love the deverb, which is the stock reverb in Pro Tools. I have to filter out a lot of the top end for it to sound good, but it can actually work really well. But you might want to experiment or demo a couple of reverbs that might be really lush and really beautiful. Maybe some convolution reverbs, which are reverbs that they've actually created a recording or almost a map of real spaces, like real halls. They'll go and sample the impulse response of a real hall, and then you can apply that. So famous buildings, famous churches, famous studios. That might be a real nice investment for you if you're doing choir or choral music. It's just something to consider. Great question. Vasco writes in from the VIP community. I'm from Jamaica. So we got from Australia to Jamaica. And my main music relates to reggae and dance hall. I'm a producer, but need to learn beat creation, recording, and mixing as an engineer. I've produced quite a lot of songs, but was not able to get the exposure for my products as I would like. So I saw your email and decided to educate as much as possible from your training. Looking forward to attend. Okay, that wasn't really a question. I hope you're on the call, Vasco. Are you on the call? Let me see. Yeah, Vasco's here. Okay, good. Sorry. I was just reading what I saw, so I'm glad you're here. Hopefully you asked a question. I'll go through the Q&As in a minute. Robert Rivera wrote in, as a singer-songwriter, should I expand the library of sounds and patches that I use to produce my songs? I worry that when others hear my songs, they'll hear recognizable stock sounds from my DAW. Okay, cool. So you're doing a lot of like virtual instruments or samples. Yes. So you know what? You should totally watch Ill Factor stuff in Beat Academy or just on his YouTube channel, Rob. Like when I've worked with him, and we're working on some music right now, we've finished a track together. We've got like 4 or 5 other ones that are in progress. We just need to finish. But what he does is he messes with sounds in Ableton using a lot of the same plugins everyone else has, and then he'll mangle them. He'll just add plugins and distortion and filters and reverbs, and he does sound design on the fly. He just kind of creates stuff. So it might have even been a common patch that you would have, that I would have, that everybody would have. But then he does his own sound design on the fly to make it something totally unique. And it's just part of his process. I think you could do that without buying anything new. Just use the plugins you have to affect the patches and just make them different and just kind of create new sounds. So really good question, though. I really, really like that. Let's see. On the live call, Daniel says, do you have an idea to help make arrangements? I'm new to arranging. I've been trying to practice what you taught us, but every time I have to make an arrangement on drums, piano, guitar using Expand, I mess up, which Expand is a virtual instrument, a sampler in Pro Tools. I mess up with tempo. Nothing seems to work and fit together. I always get lost when I try to make a different riff and repeat it. Seems so easy when I see you doing it, but I get frustrated. So Daniel, it sounds like you're talking about sort of adding virtual instruments to a recording and beefing up an arrangement. So part of it is knowing your limitations. For example, I cannot really play piano. So if I'm recording something, I'm gonna bring in my drummer friends. They're gonna play drums, or I'm gonna use Easy Drummer because I can't do drums. But drums are gonna be there. I'll play bass. I'll play acoustic guitar, lead, electric guitar. Sometimes I'll bring in a lead guitar player because I'm not really a lead guitar player. I can create parts, and I've done that before in records when I couldn't bring somebody on. But usually I try to bring on one of my buddies to play lead guitar. But then when I'm like filling out the arrangement, when you see me do stuff in videos, I'm doing the stuff that I can do. It's very simple. It's a couple of chords. Like I'm going to hit a pad or an organ that moves like one note. I'm going to do a simple piano riff where it's like a chord and like, ba-na, because that's all I can do. I'm going to add tambourine. I'm going to just use the pencil tool and add a couple of notes for some other synth. An arpeggiator or something. I'm going to do the simple, easy things that I know how to do and try to make it really tasteful. So I know my limitations. So I'm not attempting to play it. Even if I heard a really cool piano part, I'm not going to attempt it because I know it won't sound good because I can't play it. So I work within my limitations and do what only I can do and make it sound good. And the more you listen to me, the more you're going to know it's very similar because I can only do but so much. Otherwise, I'd have to bring in other musicians. And I do that from time to time. Like I've tried to create cello lines in the past and they just sound dumb. So I've hired cello players on certain songs in the past, and that's been worth it if I really wanted a specific part because I just can't do it. So part of it is knowing your limitations. And then the other part, Daniel, is just practice. You will get better. And to be honest, it is hard if you're a newer musician or you're really good at your one instrument, you're a singer-songwriter, now you're getting into production and you're trying to fill out your arrangements and play everything. Yes, you can play everything because all the virtual instruments are there, but that doesn't mean you should. If you're not good at these other instruments, you should get other people to play on them if you really want it to sound good. You should collaborate. You should collaborate with someone here in VIP who can. If you're like me and can't play piano, post inside the VIP community and say you want someone to play piano, and you'll pay them. Or you'll do a trade or something. The problem comes when so many home studio owners say, oh, I can do it all myself because of the tools and the technology, and they want to do it all themselves, but they suck at 5 instruments that they're trying to play, and they're only good at 1. That's kind of like just being naive or being stubborn or prideful. If you really want your stuff to sound good and you're not good at an instrument, hire someone to do it or collaborate with a buddy. That's what I would encourage you to do. The best home studio tracks are good because they have really talented musicians playing on them. A few of you are like crazy multi-talented and you can play everything. I've had clients and students of mine who self-produce everything, and it's just maybe not the drums, like maybe they'll do easy drummer, but they're such a killer musician that they create really passable easy drummer tracks because they have a great ear, and then they play every other instrument and they sing and they songwrite and they mix, and their stuff sounds phenomenal. They're just crazy talented. Lucky them. The rest of us, somewhere in between being good at one thing and being good at a few things, have to like collaborate. And I'm not afraid to do that. So that's what I would tell you to do if you feel like your arrangements aren't coming together. Just collaborate. Peter in the live call says, what insight can you give us for using effects and plugins as a creative element? Having a low pass filter on a rhythm guitar with a swelling reverb, using heavy gating with distortion and phasing for a synth keyboard, crazy stuff like that. Those are really good ideas. What insight can I give you? The only insight I could tell you is to just go crazy, like do weird stuff. Allow yourself time as part of your process. Don't spend forever, but allow yourself some measure of time to just drag in weird plugins and try weird things and assume that most things won't work. I don't have a specific set of weird things that I do. I've done like stutter edits. I've done filtering of things. I love, in Pro Tools, there's a plugin called, I think, the TalkBox plugin. Is that the one? The Air Talk plugin, but it's like a wah-wah and a distortion plugin built into one. And so you get these weird filtered, like distorted, like so you can take a real full guitar and just mangle it, and it allows the listener to like hear it. And it doesn't cover up the other guitars because it's just got a very singular small area of tone that it's taking up. I use that a lot. It's a weird plugin, but I use that a lot because it really helps when there's layers of guitars. So yeah, I'll just experiment. Find a couple of weird plugins that you like in your collection that become your go-tos. I think you asked that question twice. Substance 242 in the live call says, hey, from Slovakia, first time here. God, I hope I'm muted in this Zoom thingy. Yes, you are. Question. Steven Wilson, excellent artist. See also Porcupine Tree, is so good at mixing, also in 5.1. He is supposedly not even doing mastering. Do you think he is a human from this planet? Is that even possible? Smiley face. Thank you for all the stuff. I love that question. Substance 242 from Slovakia. Yes, he might be superhuman, but what Steven's doing, if that's true, is exactly what you should be doing. You should be mixing as if the mastering phase doesn't exist. You should, I'm not trying to bag on any mastering engineers. I've got some really good friends that are mastering engineers. I was literally on a phone with a mastering engineer yesterday who's just a good guy. I don't really think you need mastering. Okay, I say that partly sarcastically, but mostly true in the sense that if your mix was done perfectly, a good mastering engineer would not do anything to it. A good mastering engineer would say, let's just turn it into an MP3, make sure it's on or cut it to the record. Sorry, my phone's blown up with stupid. Must just be people at my door. Like a good mastering engineer shouldn't have to do anything if it's a flawless mix. The mastering engineer's job is not to do stuff. Mastering is not some magical thing. It's just a final, it's like checks and balances, like a final stop. The best thing about a mastering engineer is that he or she is not you. That's the best thing about a mastering engineer, is that they're not in love with your mix. So they're going to have a little bit more unbiased, critical ear and be able to go, you know what, this is really good, but the low mids are a little wonky. Now, some people say the best thing about a mastering engineer is his room or her speakers or whatever. And I get what they're saying. You might be able to hear something that you didn't hear and they can correct it. And there's some value there. But great mixes have been made and are being made in suboptimal situations. that you don't need a flawless room and a flawless mastering engineer to get something that sounds really, really good. You just don't. So when you mix, it should hold up against masters. That's why I reference mastered professional mixes when I'm mixing, because I want it to hang with a really, really good mix. The only thing it won't have is the same volume. So I pull the volume down of the professional mix that I'm referencing, so I can have a fair comparison. And then I know the only difference is level, and I can get level with a limiter. That's easy. Or I can just run it through eMastered, and just whatever I want to do. But eMastered will still mess with the tone a bit. So that's not really that big of a deal. It just means he's a really good mixer. Then that's what we should all be shooting for. So yes, mix as if you don't need mastering. And then even if you do get it mastered, it'll be even better. Good question. Randy from the live call, what is your opinion on room correction software? So I have a bunch. I've used, a bunch. Two big ones. I've used ARC from IK Multimedia, and I have SonarWorks, specifically the headphone plugin. But I also have the room bundle. I haven't used it yet. So room correction is clever because it can compensate for the weirdness in your room. And in theory, what then you hear out of your speakers, even with your room, is a flat response. I've used it before. I think I got some good mixes with it. I go back and forth. The last couple of years, I haven't used any room correction or headphone correction. I go through phases where I don't want to have to need it. But anytime you use room correction software, it's going to be eye-opening. It's going to be shocking how much it changes what you hear, because I think that reveals how jacked up all of our rooms are. But I don't think you need a flat response to make accurate mix decisions, which again maybe sounds controversial, because I don't think flat matters. I think what matters is that you listen to your mix on different speakers. Like if you have speakers, have a good pair of headphones, and then have a crap speaker, and then listen to it on an iPhone, and listen to it in earbuds. Like I was literally talking to a mastering engineer friend yesterday, and he has a checklist for mastering clients that want to hire him for mastering. And it's like, before I do your project, it asks him a bunch of questions. And one of the questions is, have you listened to your mix on earbuds, a second set of speakers, your car, laptop speakers? It asks that person to make sure they've listened to it on multiple speakers, because most of the time it will reveal stuff that's wrong or broken or off or out of balance in your mix. And you can go fix that in the mix. And he doesn't want to have to mess with that in mastering if it could be fixed in the mix. And all that shows that that's the way you learn. That's the way you get a good mix, is you check it on multiple speakers. And then reference, because even in a bad room, corrected or uncorrected, a reference tells you what should be accurate, what is correct. So for example, in my room, in this spot right here, like I said, I don't hear a ton of low end. If I move my head back here, I get more low end. So if I'm sitting here and I don't get a lot of low end, I could tell myself, this mix needs more low end. But if I listen to a reference track, the reference won't have a lot of low end either. And that's correct. So I have to go, so I have to turn my low end back down to match the reference, because I probably had too much low end because I don't hear enough. So reference gets you out of trouble 9 times out of 10. But I'm not saying you shouldn't get room correction software. You should try it out, because I have friends that swear by it. I've had good results with it. I just don't think you need it. And I kind of go back and forth. But maybe I'll change my answer next year. Let's see. Peter, I only asked your question once, bud. I see your question and I've got it. It looks like you asked it 4 times. JF SIMARD says, I know you teach that plugins don't make the mix, but how do you reconcile this with famous mixers, aka Pensado, who use a large bunch of third-party plugins on each track? How this brings up better mixes? Well, because all you're doing there, correlation doesn't equal causation, okay? The fact that they're a pro mixer with good sounding mixes and they have third-party plugins, those are two things that are correlated. That doesn't mean that one causes the other. That's just a huge assumption. And that's very common. That's how advertising works, right? You see a very attractive woman, and she is using a Nordic stair stepper machine in a commercial, and you go, wow, she's fit and attractive. And a woman watching the commercial says, and she's using that Nordic track in the commercial, therefore it must be because of that Nordic track. If I bought that Nordic track, I would be fit and attractive as well. It's correlation. Those things are correlated in the video on purpose to make you think that one causes the other. Now, they could be related, but usually, and I'm not saying this is an advertising ploy from the, I mean, that is how they market plugins, but I have nothing against third-party plugins. The point is, third-party plugins aren't better than stock plugins. I don't know where that comes from. Where it probably came from was in the late 90s, early 2000s, the stock plugins in ProTools, which was one of the only DAWs around at the time, weren't that great. So that's where Waves came up. Waves has been making plugins for over 20 years because they saw a need. They're like, look, ProTools is a great platform to record digitally. They have some EQs and compressors, but they don't sound good. So let's focus on making boutique, EQs and compressors, specifically the Renaissance plugins from back in the day, to mimic some of the gear we're used to, and we'll make it sound better. And a lot of engineers in the late 90s, early 2000s started to buy Waves plugins because they sounded better than the stock stuff. And maybe there's holdover from that. But stock plugins these days, most of them sound really, really good. So there's that. And then if you see a professional, of course a professional is going to use third-party plugins because that's what they do for a living. Like, why would they not try all the stuff? Like Dave Pensato is a great example. He's a friend of mine. I know him. We've hung out. Like, Dave gets bored. He wants to try out a new plugin on every single mix. That's part of what makes it fun for him, is like trying a new plugin and seeing if it gives him a new sound. That's great. That's great. He likes the tools. He likes playing around with them. It's like a toy for him, and it might inspire him while he's doing a mix. That's totally great. But if I sat Dave Pensato down with a fresh installation of Pro Tools with just the included plugins, could he turn out a chart-topping mix? 100% he could. 100% he could. Why? Because he's Dave Pensato. Because he totally understands what mixes should sound like. He understands level. He understands EQ and compression. He understands effects. He understands arrangement. He understands automation. He understands contrast. And he's working with really well-recorded tracks. So those things are correlated, or you see them correlated because they go hand in hand, but it doesn't mean one causes the other. So that's my answer to you. Now, I say all that because I just hate when people use that plugin thing as an excuse. I hate it, and I've been hearing it for over a decade, right? It's like, oh, my mixes don't sound good because I don't have some good third-party plugins. Once I get those, then it'll sound good. That's one reason why I exist, is to tell people like that to stop making excuses, because that's not the reason why your mixes suck. You're the reason why your mixes suck. Always, always, always. It has nothing to do with what plugins you use. That being said, I have nothing against third-party plugins. I own and use third-party plugins. Just watch my mixes, okay? There's nothing wrong with them. I just don't want you to use it as a crutch. I want you to get good at mixing with stock plugins, because then you can mix with anything. You prove to yourself that you're good at mixing, and it's not the plugins that make you good. So that's where I'm going with that. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. Brian Taylor, longtime supporter of Recording Revolution. Welcome, Brian. Just moved and was about to build some acoustic panels for my room. However, I already have a lot of the black foam pieces, but I wanted better absorption. What are your panels made out of, and where do you order them from? They appear thin in videos, but I can't make out what they're made of. Do they work good? I'm debating building my own. Would love your thought on panels. Thanks a lot, my friend. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, man. So behind me are the old classic Orlex, the cheap Orlex stuff. Around me, and what you see in videos when I'm facing the other way, when you see the black panels, those are Prime Acoustic. Let me look them up here. Prime Acoustic. Yeah, the Prime Acoustic London kit. Okay, so they're spelled Prima, Prima, or just Prim Acoustic, Prime Acoustic, and then get one of their London kits. maybe it was the London 16. I can't remember, but they have a really helpful website, and they you can type in how big your room is, and then they give you like different kits based off of like, because I have like 2 main bass traps and 8 panels is what it came with. I really like them. They're thicker, way sturdier. They've got like wood frame, way better than the Auralex panels behind me. So I would check those out. I am a BIY person. Buy it yourself, not a DIY. I can't make anything. Okay. I can buy anything. I can't make anything. So I would never, ever think about building panels. That sounds awful to me. But if you like stuff like that, go for it. Just not my deal. Merry Christmas to you, Brian. All right, let's see. In the VIP community, Stu from Australia. I consider myself a musician, producer, arranger, but don't have the vocal chops to be as good as I like to be on my own tracks. Only half decent dummy vocal tracks. Do you have a fave session or a top-line singer resource that you can recommend? I've used Star Now for released collabs or Studio Pros in the US for session vocals up to date. My style spans electronic, pop, alternate. P.S. Also want to let you know I just started your mixing course, even though I've been doing music production as a hobby for 15 years. I've never had a formal training. Even the first part of the course has helped my workflow so far. I'm excited to do the rest of the course over the holidays. Awesome. Thanks, Stu. Let's see. I've never used either of those. I haven't used Studio Pros or Star Now, partly because I'm a singer. That's what I do. So I sing on my own stuff. But when I collaborate, I just collaborate with friends. I have so many musician friends. I bring them on. If I need lady vocals, I bring on lady friends that are really good and talented. People I sing with at church and have been in bands with before. If I need guitar players, I hire them out or have friends. So I've never hired an actual session player for any of my songs other than through connections. I did a solo album when I was in college, and we hired an engineer and a session drummer and a bass player from Nashville, but that was through the engineer friend of mine who brought guys on. So I haven't used any of those services, so I couldn't really tell you. Stu, have you already tried? Hopefully you've already, tried here in the VIP, like put out a message of I need a vocalist, and maybe have some people give you a portfolio of their vocal chops. So I bet you could collaborate with somebody here. There's got to be some good vocalists in here. We got tons of you in VIP, and many of you are good singers. So I would try that. In the VIP community, Nate writes in, I was wondering if you had some good tips for making that kick cut through the mix so you can really feel it, not just hear it, if that makes sense. Yes, parallel processing. 100% parallel processing. So you could do this a bunch of ways. It could just be parallel compression on the kick drum, which really helps. Just start with that. Parallel compression. So if you've never done that, you take a copy of the kick drum through a send it out to a bus. So now you've got 2 of the exact same kick drum, nothing special. Then you compress the snot out of the second kick drum. So it's really like pumping, and it loses its dynamics. It sounds squashed, but like really slow attack, fast release, or try the opposite. Sometimes the opposite works. Really high ratio, slam it, and then bring that fader up slightly, and it creates a lot of weight. But the other thing too is like hype the EQ on that track as well. You could hype the EQ, like roll off a lot of low end, really boost the crud out of 1K, 2K, 3K, somewhere where the beater really cuts through, where it sounds really snappy, and make it a really hyped EQ bump there. Add some saturation, harmonic exciter, anything to make it crispy and like clicky, and then compress the heck out of it, and then blend that parallel track in with your natural kick drum. That's going to make it really cut through. There's a lot of ways to do that parallel channel, and it depends on what you need, but the key is parallel processing. That's the only real way to get that modern kick drum sound the way you're hearing it. If it's really cutting through, it's not just processing on the kick drum, it's the kick drum plus a copy of the kick drum doing its thing. Really good question. Mike from Green Bay in the VIP community wrote in, just wondering if you knew of some secret drink or anything that can clear out the sinuses before recording a vocal track. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know of a secret drink. I'm sure there is some vocal thing. I mean, when you're chords are really, really like raw and tight, like vocal cords. Throat coat is something you can get. It's a T. That might be worth checking out. But clearing out the sinuses, man, I'll just get some like Mucinex, just something hardcore, some over-the-counter drug, and just blast it out. If you do any of the essential oils, any kind of diffuser, you can look up what essential oils are good for breaking up the sinuses, and you could get a diffuser and like sort of breathe it in for like 30 minutes or something like that, or an hour. That can help. Always drink warm liquids. But yeah, that's all I can think of right now. I don't have a secret drink. I should make one and sell it. I have to figure it out though. All right, back to the live questions. SA9589 says, based on the genre of music you produce for sync licensing, would the mix mastering techniques differ? You said orchestral or hip hop. Would mixing mastering techniques differ? So yes, like orchestral and hip hop are totally different, right? Styles. So for example, like you're gonna have way more low end on a hip hop track than you would want on an orchestral track. So I think your overall tonal balance is going to be very, very different on those two. So that's going to be the biggest thing, is how they present. We're used to hearing a lot of extended low end on hip hop, and we're used to a lot more uppers and like clarity up top on orchestral. Like if you listen to really classic orchestral music, it's really crispy and very like a lot of, this is really a sweeping generalization, but you hear a lot of good 10K and maybe 12K. It's really nice top end on orchestral music because of the air on the strings, and just usually if it's in a really nice hall or a nice room, you want to get the reverb decay, and it's nice and crispy. So they just present totally differently. So you got to kind of keep that in mind. Hip hop also is you're going to use a lot of parallel processing to just make things pop and crunch and hit hard. Whereas in orchestral, they don't need to hit that hard. They're going to be a lot more dynamic. You have lower lows and louder loud highs. Reference a lot of materials are going to be the best thing, but the tools you use are going to be the same. EQ and compression and level are going to be the main tools. And how you think about them is the exact same way, but just how much or how little or what decisions you make will be different because they're very different styles. Good question. Gary asks in the live call, do you like to use outboard pre's, EQs, and compressors? Gary, the only outboard I use is a Focusrite ISA or ISA 220. They don't make that model of it, but it's the Focusrite channel strip. You can see it in my home studio tour videos, and you'll see it in the back of my videos sometimes. It's the blue. So it's a preamp. It's an ISA preamp. So the Focusrite ISA or the ISAs are the preamps from the Focusrite Forte console. And the Forte console and that preamp was designed by Rupert Neve, who designed obviously the Neve console. So it's very much like a Neve style, heavy transformer based. It's a great preamp. Just Focusrite makes some really, really good preamps. So I've always liked that style of preamp. And that channel strip also has an EQ I'm looking at, a compressor, say 1, 2, 3 band EQ, compressor, and a de-esser. And mine does not have the digital output. It does. Yeah, it has digital out as well. I don't use that. I just run an analog out into my interface. So that's the only outboard I have, and I use it for recording my vocals primarily. That's about it, recording my vocals. So it gives me a little bit of EQ and a little bit of compression and a nice different preamp for the lead vocal going in. But that's it. Like, I'm a fan of having one good channel strip. I think it's great for vocals because it gives you a lot of control. Now, a lot of these days you can record some of these Thunderbolt interfaces now. They're so low latency you can record through plugins. So you could slap on Stephen Slate's virtual. He's got virtual preamps and then you could add EQs and compressors and do it all almost in real time with plugins, which is kind of cool. And then you almost don't need a channel strip. That's all I use. I don't do any outboard processing with mixing. I do it all in the box. But yeah, that's what I've got. Rob on the live call asks, are you aware of any software for organizing lyrics? Ideally something that allows changing the bass key for the song. So are you talking about lyrics or are you talking about like charts? Because if you're talking about lyrics and there's no key, right? It's just words. Maybe you can clarify in the chat. Back to Michael chatted in related to the vocal, clearing up your vocals or the sinuses. He said, try a vocal mister. One's called My Pure Mist. It's a handheld steam inhaler. Works good for getting your vocals prepared for singing. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, Rob, I don't know. It sounds like you're talking about charts. And if you have some kind of like Sibelius or some notation software, it should be able to change the key with one click. Varun asks in the live call, is there a difference between a regular compressor compared to something like an LA2A, which seems to come under something called limiting compressor? How are they different? So an LA2A is a compressor. That's it. So it's just a different style of compressor. It is an optical compressor, if I'm correct. And optical compressors, they react differently to sound. So it's people say it's a little smoother, a little silkier. So two classic compressors are like the 1176 and the LA2A. The blackface 1176 is very famous, and the LA2A, that's silver, kind of two knob with a little bit of red highlights, right? Those are two classic compressors, and any good studio you go into is going to have at least one of each. Okay, I don't care where you go in the world, any decent studio is going to have one LA2A and one 1176. The reason why is because they sound very different. So an 1176, I think it's a transformer-based compressor. If I'm wrong, you can leave a comment. It is going to it's very fast. It's a very fast compressor. Even on its slowest attack setting is still relatively fast, which can be really great. It's great for any kind of rock vocal, hip-hop vocal. It's just great for any kind of modern aggressive vocal when it's like an upbeat song. It clamps on the vocal really well, and it just helps you get that gain and that level. It's just a great compressor for vocals. It's great for anything. Great for snares, great for kick drum. But I'm using vocals as an example. An LA2A, which is an optical compressor, it uses light and optics to. I'm not that smart, but it doesn't react as quickly. It's a little smoother. And so if it was like a ballad, a slow vocal performance, maybe the LA2A would sound a little smoother. This is a very generalization, but it just grabs onto audio a little bit different than, say, an 1176. So they're really ubiquitous. They're very famous. They're just classic examples, but it is just a compressor. You're going to see if these compressors are so old, like some of them might say limiting amplifier. Some might say limiter, even though it's a compressor. Sometimes those words were used interchangeably with that style of dynamic control. Sometimes they're called levelers, right? They're all doing very similar things. They're listening to audio and turning it down the moment it comes in at some predetermined ratio, speed, etc., and letting go, of course. So LA2A is a regular compressor. It's a little bit different. There's some other differences. It has an input knob as opposed to like a threshold knob. But I've done some videos on different compressors on the channel as well, and showing like they do similar things. They just have different names for the controls. Hope that helps answer the question. All right, let's see. Earhard in the live call says, Graham, great to be with you. Thanks for all your information. I produce mainly jingles, for example, background music to presentations, and audio logos as part of corporate identities in my studio. Very cool. What sales channels, label would you suggest for such music to send in? I fear that most labels are not interested in this. Yeah, so you wouldn't go with the label. You'd be more interested in like sync licensing or like licensing your music. There's a guy I was just talking to. He has a website called Sync Songwriter. If you go to syncsongwriter.com, you can check him out. I was connected with him. He seems to have really helpful resources on getting connected in the sync world. And you'd be creating music for sync licensing so that people can use for background music, things like that. You can probably make better money than just doing stock music as well. So yeah, Sync, SYNC songwriter, syncsongwriter.com. Check him out. He might have some really helpful stuff. Good question. Nick on the live call says, hey, I use GarageBand. I use MIDI to record bass lines with the preset basses. How do I mix to get a more filling and boomy sound? So Nick, you would just kind of just check out any of my videos on mixing bass. I would treat it just like any other bass because it's a sample bass guitar. So I would just treat, it's going to be a combination of compression is going to help bass for sure because it's going to create more sustain, which so like not just the pluck but like the fatness of the bass, compression, harmonics, EQ. That's going to be it. So I would look up any of my videos on how to mix bass and I would treat it the exact same way because that's what it is a sampled bass 9 times out of 10. Good question. JF said, let me rephrase. I think what I mean is how essential you need to add layers of small improvements as opposed to basic EQ and compression. And when he's talking about third-party plugins, maybe. So here's what I don't like. And I hear this a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for a long, long time. I hear things like, Graham, you've taught me basic EQ and compression. That's great, but I want advanced stuff. I want like advanced tricks or advanced effects or like the stuff that the pros are doing. And I hate when people say that because they're unfortunately in for a rude awakening. They're missing the point. Like the real pros, like if you talk about like the Al Schmitz of the world, like potentially the greatest engineer ever, the Al Schmitz of the world don't even like to mix. They want to record it in such a way that you don't need to put any EQ or any compression or any effects on the multi-tracks. Like you don't even need to adjust the level balance. Like the idea for them when they record is like you get the microphones where you want it and you get the gain just right, that like the trumpet comes in at the right level, the bass comes in the right level, you pull the faders up and it's like done. Like basic isn't amateur. Basic, it's a word. It's not fair. Like EQ and compression, it is the thing. Like that is the tool beyond what you did on recording day, and beyond level choices in the mix. Right? Level is the most important thing come time to mix. Then EQ and then compression. Then for sure, so maybe ambience. Right? Delays and reverbs are super helpful tools. Right? But there's a reason why I keep talking about the same effects over and over again. Is that those are the things, sorry, my camera's freaking out. Like those are the things that make a mix good or not. Those are the things that people, come on, camera, figure it out. There's my face. Those are the things that make the average fan go, oh, this sounds good or doesn't sound good. Now, if you want to get creative and create unique sounds, like that's a different element. That's sound design in my mind. Like it's a great idea for a mix to think of and like land on one really cool sound. It could be the guitar tone. It could be a cool vocal effect. It could be a little synth effect. It could be a little teeny riff. That's like the little teeny cool thing about this one song. Could be a vocal like, oh, 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 that's really affected that comes in every once in a while. That's like the little mini hook thing, little tasty treat, of the mix. But that means nothing if you don't have the EQ, compression, and level right, So when you get really good at mixing and you're looking for new sounds for the little teeny things, or you're just tired of like the way your mixes are sounding and you want to just change it up and you want a different tone, that's like a painter just wanting a different color to look at or a different textured brush just to see something different. That's great. Get another plugin that's a little different. That's more for you as the creator and less for the fan. The fan isn't going to care what EQ you used or what little tricks you did, right? That's not how they listen. They notice, can I hear the vocal? Can I hear the drums? Is the bass real fat and loud? Is the mix too quiet? Like that, they hear those big things. And I really want you guys to get that. Not to say you shouldn't fine tune the mix and make it as perfect as you can, but those little small improvements aren't really that big of a deal. in my opinion. Let's see. Daniel asks, do you have videos to master Pro Tools? Last time I deleted by accident a master track, and then all the other tracks disappear. I lose all the tracks that I have been working on for almost 4 hours. So Daniel, I mean, I have a whole course on Pro Tools called Rethink Pro Tools, but hopefully you've got the setting set up in Pro Tools that auto saves backups. And you can open up your folder where the song is, and there's a session file backups. There's another folder, and inside it's going to have like 10, 20 versions of the session that are minutes and hours old. And hopefully you find a version you can open up that happened, that was saved before you deleted those tracks, and it hopefully will still be there. But yeah, take Rethink Pro Tools. That'll help you. All right, good question. Let's see. Already hit an hour. I'm going to keep going if that's cool. Earhard made a comment about Al Schmidt. He says, so true what you said about Al Schmidt type of working. I had the honor to work some days with him at a workshop at the Drums and Percussion Day earlier this year. That's awesome. The way I see it is we live in a really strange time with music. Like, this is interesting, where mixing is like elevated, and the mix engineers are like elevated as gods. And like, that's where the magic happens in a recording. And so because of that, they're paid handsomely, or at least they used to be. That's kind of changing now, but paid handsomely for doing their secret something, their magic something to the recordings, and adding their flair. And for good reason. Dude, mixing engineers are awesome. I'm not coming down on them at all. But this is an evolution of the way we made music as engineers. For years, and I still think it's true, like, we've forgotten the truth that the Al Schmitts in the world know, that the song happens on recording day. Like, what you hear happens on recording day, not in the mix. Definitely not in the mastering room. Okay, mastering is like so far from what makes the song a song. Mixing for sure can have a lot of influence on the way the song is presented and balanced, but really it all came on recording day. So recording engineers are the ones we should be elevating. But we've gotten lazy in recording because of unlimited takes, unlimited track counts, unlimited storage, unlimited plugins. Like, it's made us lazy. So we just create a bunch of crap, and then when we get to mixing, that's when we'll figure it out and piece it together. And to me, it's just a backwards way to work, and it's sad. So we should always record in such a way as if the mixing phase doesn't exist, which is what Al Schmidt does so well. And then you should mix in such a way that the mastering phase does not exist. If you're assuming it's going to get better later, you're done. You've lost. So if you don't like the way it sounds on recording day, re-record it. Re-record it. Add plugins. Use EQ on the way in. That's what the pros do, right? The pros get it right on recording day. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what you should do. That's what I should do. Cool. Yeah, Earhart said he's mastering directly on recording day. Yeah, like, what? Why wait? Make it good now. Peter's question is Santa Claus going to bring you anything for your studio this year? No, he's not. My wife and I decided this year not to get each other presents. And it's definitely, I haven't gotten anything for my studio in years. I haven't. Partly because once it went years ago when I went professional and I started mixing clients, I always just use money from client gigs to buy all my gear. So everything that I have is paid for by clients, basically. So I don't need to ask for stuff for Christmas. So no, I'm not going to get anything from Santa this year. Nothing from my studio. Gary wants to know what camera I'm using. I'm using a Logitech Brio. Earhart asked a good question. Why should I place 10 mics for drums, 3 for each instrument, and 5 for some other vocals beside this? So I'm trying to understand your question, Earhart. Why should I have 10 mics on the drums, 3 for the instruments, 5 for some vocals, and then some extra mics when just recording a band that makes a good sound in my 2 ears? Oh, so being a little sarcastic, but isn't there kind of truth here? Like, why do we need all these mics to capture what sounds good with just our 2 ears in the room? Well, that's a great question. I mean, we never did back in the day, right? Back in the day, there was one microphone, just one capture source, not even two, right? It's not even as good as our ears. Our ears, we can hear things in stereo, kind of. And they would have one microphone, and they would place the band in the room further away from the mic or closer to the mic based on how loud the instrument was and how important it was. So the drummer would be pretty far away because the drummer's very loud. Didn't have, the vocalist would be really close to the mic because the vocalist is going to be drowned out by the drummer, and the vocals are the most important. So they would basically mix by putting people in the right spot in the room. And then you just have one mic, you hit record, and you would be able to hear what the balance sounded like. And then in stereo, you'd have two mics doing the exact same thing. So in theory, yeah, you could do that. Now, a couple things. One is that we're used to real modern records, and multi-track recording changed everything, okay? Les Paul invented multi-track recording, basically, as we know it today. And so the idea that we could have multiple tracks, because 4 tracks was a big deal, right? The Beatles had 4 tracks. Instead of just having 2, like for 2 mics to capture the band, they're like, dude, we could record things at different times, one at a time. We can layer things. We can have a microphone just over the drum kit and a microphone on the vocals, and then we can balance them later with faders. We can even apply effects to them and isolate them a little bit to have more control. I mean, that is a powerful concept, and we're just used to that now. So these days, if you want to make a record that's competitive, you basically need to use multi-track recording like you're describing. I know you know that. You're kind of being sarcastic, but you need to do it because to get it to sound like what people used to, that's the only way to do it, right? But the truth is exactly there. I love the simplicity of like an Al Schmidt. Again, going back to Al. Okay, even with multiple mics, he's not afraid of that. But like, how can I reduce it down to its simplest? Like with drums, if you have 10 mics on a drum kit, you're asking for problems. You're just asking for problems because you're gonna have so much phase cancellation. I just did a mix, and I think it's either through Mixing University or for our Dueling Mixes membership. I did a mix, and I pulled up the drums. They're all done by session musicians in Nashville and a professional engineer. Like, these are the best of the best. And there were some phase issues on the mics and the drums. They didn't get right on recording day. Like, even the pros make mistakes. When you got multiple mics on a drum kit, you're asking for trouble. And I think you can get better sounds with fewer mics. You can get bigger sounds with fewer mics. I still would prefer 3 or more mics than just one, because I'd love to have something on the kick drum, something on the snare, because then I can compress those and get really modern sounds. But you certainly don't need 10. And it makes you I would like you to maybe use that simplicity to challenge yourself. Like, how can I make this sound as big as possible, as fewer mics as possible? So yeah, good question. Back in the community, Steven from Ottawa, Canada says, I'm mixing a 20-plus track project with professionally recorded tracks. Thank you, Joe Gilder. All right. By default, the overall volume is clipping the main bus. Should I put a trim plug in on each track and reduce it till I get the main bus averaging minus 18? Or should I put that trim plug only on the buses that my tracks are sent to? For example, I have 10 drum tracks that output to a drum bus, guitar tracks to a bus. I could either put a trim plug in on the individual tracks or just on the buses that I have. Okay, so 2 things in your question, Stephen, or Stefan. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. One is, you said something about getting the main bus to average minus 18. You don't need that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the minus 18 average volume or RMS, that's for the individual tracks, ideally. But it can apply to the mixed bus for sure. But that's for the individual tracks. And it's not peak volume. You don't want it to peak at minus 18. That's really quiet. It's going to peak at minus 6 or something. But it's the average volume. So I just want to make sure that you don't worry about the average volume being minus 18 on the master fader. I don't think that's super important, although that's probably a good volume to shoot for. But yes, you would want to trim them on the individual tracks, not the buses, because you want to trim them before they would hit plugins, before the signal hits plugins on the individual track. So if you're going to put an EQ on a kick drum, you'd want to trim the kick drum track down, not the drum bus, because you want to get the level down before the plugin on the kick drum. You always want to gain stage on the individual tracks first so that they're hitting the plugins at the sweet spot. And then that obviously will help you all the way down the line. Great question. Ivan writes in from Croatia, questions about drums. Do you use drive or distortion on drums? Do you use it on drum bus? How do you shape the drum sound? How do you EQ or compress your drums to fit in the mix with vocals and other elements? And then he has a question about vocoder effects. Okay. So I don't use a ton of distortion on drums. Sometimes on snare, I'll distort the snare a little bit. Because when you do that, you reduce the peaks, you reduce some of the dynamics, and so you can get a little more level out of the snare without it peaking too much. I'll use saturation on drum bus sometimes, like tape saturation. How do I shape the sound? Dude, I've got some good videos on my channel, again, on how I mix drums. I would check that out. A lot of it is filtering out stuff you don't need. It's all about really finding room for the kick and the snare are the most important things with modern music with drums. So it's really about making sure the kick and the snare have their own space. Yeah, those are two of the most important elements in any modern music. So I don't really have a go-to simple, quick answer for you, Ivan, but check out my YouTube videos on that for sure. Let's see. Daniel asks in the live call, I have a simple interface, the UR28M. It has 2 microphone inputs, 1 for instrument. If I want to record live with the drum using 3 or 4 mics, plus the keyboard and the voice, how do I connect all that to my audio interface to make a live recording from the home studio? You can't unless that interface has any kind of ADAT input. What is that? The UR28M interface? Steinberg. Let me take a look at it. 2 microphone preamps. So you have 4 inputs. So I'm looking at that interface now. You've got 2 mic pre's, 2 line inputs. So the most you, you've got, no. Yeah, that's it. You have SPDIF in as well. So you can technically get another 2 channels out of that. So you have basically 6. Yeah, you got 6. Looks like you got 6 inputs. So you only got 2 microphone pre's. So you're going to need 2 more external pre's to then run line output into the 2 extra line inputs. That would give you 4. And then you would need a stereo mic pre or 2-channel mic pre that has SPDIF out to then run SPDIF in to the interface to give you another 2 inputs. So it looks like you can really only get 6 on that. So you need to buy some additional mic pre's. But honestly, it'd probably be cheaper to get a new interface. I would just get an interface that has more mic pre's in it. That's the only way. You can do 4 mics on the drums plus a keyboard input and the voice. So you're looking at 6 inputs. Like you'd have to get external pre's or replace your interface. That's it. Good question. Darko says, a recording of this live stream going to be available for replay? Yes, all these are always put up for replay, so absolutely. Varun says, what do you use to make regular backups of your past sessions? Cloud service or good old hard drives? So 2 things these days. Everything I record into Dropbox. So my audio drive on my computer, it's a solid state drive, and I record into a Dropbox folder, which basically is a regular folder. So it's just like recording directly to my drive, but since it's nested within Dropbox, Dropbox automatically sees any change and it syncs. So it's always syncing and backing up to the cloud so that I could go anywhere. I could lose my laptop and get a new computer and my audio files will be there. So it's in theory using cloud to always automatically back it up. And then I have for like old sessions when I don't want to fill up my Dropbox with a bunch of stuff, I move over to the good old fashioned hard drives and just keep those because I like for archive stuff. Great question. Michael says in the live call, when I'm finished with the final mix and ready to bounce down in Pro Tools, I'm bouncing down as a 16-bit 44.1 sample rate wave. Then I import that wave file into iTunes and create an MP3. What do you recommend for creating wave files into MP3? I just do it in Pro Tools, man. When I export out in Pro Tools, I say make an MP3 at the same time. So it does both. It'll make the 16-bit 44.1 wave, and it'll also do an MP3. And you can do a high-quality 320 kilobits per second MP3. I just use Pro Tools. Hope that answers your question. All right, and let me see. There's a couple more that were written in. I want to get those because we're almost done here. Pierre wrote in from Quebec. Over the last few months, I have been having a hard time finishing new pieces of music. Almost every day I sit in my home studio, fire up my DAW, start experimenting with new stuff for a few hours, and then save these ideas for later, only to find myself repeating the same pattern again the next day. It feels like I've reached some kind of plateau where it's difficult for me to return to one of those ideas and actually make something out of them. I used to be able to make a new piece in 1 to 3 days. Now I'm struggling to even finish one. Any thoughts on how I could break free from this pattern and get inspired again to push through an idea over many days from start to finish? Thank you, Pierre. Absolutely. Take my 1 song, 1 month challenge. Just get on recordingrevolution.com or the YouTube channel and type in 1 song, 1 month. And you're going to see I did a series. I've done it twice years ago. And then just 2 years ago, I redid it where the challenge is write, record, mix, and release 1 song in a month. So it's real simple. Instead of thinking of an EP or looking at all your songs, just pick 1 song right now. And then throughout the month, whenever you have time in your studio, chip away at it. Maybe you write it in week 1. Maybe you record it in week 2 and 3. And then maybe you mix it in week 4 and then upload it. Like real easy stuff. I did some videos to I did the process with you and in front of you. But set a deadline. That's the key. It's just a deadline is all we're doing with that challenge is we're making it manageable. Because most people can do more than 1 song in a month. But at the same time, a lot of people are busy. 1 song in a month might be a lot. But it's relatively manageable. And it's focused and it has a clear deadline, 30 days. You got to release it. And the best thing to do is just tell your fans or tell your wife or your friends or your brother or whoever, like, hey, I'm releasing a song in the next 30 days. So they're going to hold you accountable to that. When you have that subtle pressure, like I told everyone I was going to release a song, I better do it. You'll find yourself being able to at least finish 1 song. And that's what I would do. Good question. Last 2 here from the community. Rachel from Kentucky says, my question is about setting tempos in the DAW. I'm wondering if you can set a different tempo for different sections of the song. And if so, how? Absolutely. I currently have access to the free version of GarageBand. I've not been able to figure it out. I'm interested in using Studio One, but haven't poked around too much. Is it possible to set different tempos for different sections in either of these DAWs? If not, is there another DAW that supports this? You can definitely do that in Pro Tools. It's called the conductor track in Pro Tools. You can have it speed up and slow down. You don't even have to have static changes. You can have crescendo or retards. You can have accelerandos. Is that the right term? But it can speed up or slow down. The conductor track is an awesome feature in Pro Tools. I'm assuming other DAWs have that because that's been around in Pro Tools for over 25 years. GarageBand, I'm not sure. GarageBand might be a static tempo. I'm not sure. And Studio One, I'm assuming you can do that. But I don't know how to do it in either one of those, so I couldn't tell you. But you can definitely do it in Pro Tools. And the last question, Nick, you already asked that question here all in the live call. Awesome. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. You guys are the best. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I hope you get to take some time off. I hope you get to spend it with people you love. And thanks for being a part of VIP this year. It's been so much fun. This community has done more than I ever expected it to do. The type of people in the community have been exactly what I hoped for. I was pretty confident you all would be this way, but you never know until you actually do it. So thanks for being awesome. Thanks for being in it. I'm excited for next year. Got some amazing stuff planned. So just hang in there. We're going to continue to add content and mini courses to VIP. We've got stuff in the works just to make it better. Can just continue to make it better for free. So like once you're locked in as a member, like you don't have to pay anymore. You're going to get all the new stuff, but it's just going to be awesome. But continue to stay active in it. I always say, if you wish the community were a certain way or wish people were a certain way, then be that way in the community. So if you wish more people were wanting to collab with you, then you offer to collab with others. If you wish more people would critique your mix, you critique more people's mixes. That's the only way to create a community that is exactly what you want it to be, is you got to be that. So thanks so much. Merry Christmas. And if you're watching the recording, it's the same to you. Merry Christmas. Love you. Appreciate you. And excited to make some music. Got some great stuff coming in 2019. Peace. Well, let me stop the recording before I do that.